Give us sort of a larger understanding you have about where your sort of pro-peace, or I would kind of think of it as anti-imperial or anti-war values come from.
Okay, well, I think it came from childhood or teen years. I read the autobiography of Mohandas Gandhi at about, I don't know, age 14 or something. And that was inspiring. The way he used nonviolent tactics to achieve the independence of India from the British Empire. That was an inspiring thing. And so I've been interested in peace since then. And then I got into MIT, majored in economics, and one of the reasons I wanted to go there for undergrad is because Noam Chomsky was there, and he taught political science courses as well as linguistics. So I got to take two of his political science courses in 1976. That's where I learned. That's where I became an anti-Zionist Jew. I was born and brought up Jewish, but until age 20, I didn't feel all that great about what Israel was doing to the Palestinians. But in 1976, I just became a pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist American Jew, and I've been one ever since then.
Explain anti-Zionist.
Zionism is the ideology, it's a political ideology, not religious, that says that the Jewish people have been persecuted for millennia everywhere in the world. And so this came about, this idea came up in the 1880s. We need a country of our own where we run things and we can be safe in this country. It was kind of a form of nationalism. All kinds of people were getting together and forming countries.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was part of that, but it was supported by the British Empire. And so eventually they got a Jewish state, they call it, in 1948, in part of the small area called historic Palestine. And there was supposed to be an Arab state for the other half of the country, but in 1947 and 48, the Zionists took over more land than the UN had given them, mm-hmm. and they kicked out something like 800,000 Palestinians or Arabs, mm-hmm. from parts where Israel eventually got control over. And then in 1967 they conquered the whole thing. And so there has been a movement among the Palestinian people to get their own state, and that's what's known as the two-state solution, redividing Palestine into Israel and Palestine, and capital of Israel would be West Jerusalem, capital of Palestine would be East Jerusalem.
Okay.
But that's only one option. The other option is to get rid of Zionism completely, and there would be Jews living in Palestine in the future, but they wouldn't run the place. It would be run by the majority Palestinians. Mm-hmm. That's the one-state solution.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is still obviously playing out currently.
Right now.
So, what is you're in Congress?
Okay.
What are you doing? Let's engage that issue. What do you when
Yeah.
you vote for candidate Young?
Mm-hmm.
What can we expect when you get to the Congress in relationship to the Israel-Palestine current issue?
Well, I don't think my basic larger view of it has changed at all since 1976. Basically, Israel, with the unquestioning backing of the United States since 1967, has been keeping the Palestinian people down. They've been preventing economic development in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They, I think in 2006, they, quote, put the Palestinians on a diet in the Gaza Strip. They restricted the amount of food that could come in. So, you know, they've been not starving, but at the edge since 2006. They've just intensified the oppression. And occasionally they go in and shoot the place up and destroy buildings. And this is since October 8th, 2023. This is the worst military attack on the civilian population in the entire history, you know, since the 1930s.
So, what are you advocating for currently in relationship to?
Well, okay, it's pretty simple. Immediate ceasefire, immediate withdrawal of all Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, negotiations with Hamas and other Palestinian groups toward either the two-state or the one-state solution.
So you're flexible. You want
yeah.
peace. How that peace gets achieved is.
Yeah, right. Well, so right, and a complete cutoff of all U.S. support for Israel until peace has broken out and a peace settlement has been reached. So the United States has been keeping this genocide going from October 8th till today.
Who do you work with when you're there? Who are the people to make that happen? Does that make sense? Or other congressmen, I guess, to make congresspeople to make that happen?
Well, I work with everybody.
Are there people you're aware of that are
Thomas Massey is a pretty good Republican in terms of wanting to cut the military budget because we can't afford it. He's kind of a semi-libertarian, semi-Tea Party Republican.
And of course, Massey is Kentucky District 4.
Northern Kentucky.
Northern Kentucky. All right.
Yeah, I like him. I want to work with him. I want to work with the squad of Democrats because they're the few who are now voting for ceasefire bills. You know. And I work with everybody else on issues that we agree on.
So give me your big picture on Russia and Ukraine.
I'll start. I won't start back in the 800s where Vladimir Putin started with Tucker Carlson. I'll start in 2014.
All right, it's good. I was going to say World War II, but 2014 is probably a little better.
Even better, yeah. NATO wanted to expand, and they expanded from, they were founded in 1949. They kept expanding toward the east in several stages since it was founded. And Russia views that as a threat to their national security. It's a hostile military alliance getting closer and closer to the Russian border. All right, so in 2014, Victoria Nuland and the CIA go to Ukraine and foment a coup against the middle-of-the-road president and kick him out. He has to flee. He goes to Russia, and they install a series of puppets who are more and more right-wing, more and more aligned with Nazism, the original German, Italian, Japanese ideology of strong dictator, complete control over the media.
How so? So how is it? How are they actual Nazis?
Okay, so
You hear that a lot. They're actual,
right.
literal Nazis. So what's the connection there?
All right, so fascism. Spain was a fascist country in the early part of the 1900s. But they weren't Nazis because they weren't racist. So this is a definition from Eric Zusa, an author. Fascism is this centralized control of the economy and the media, and it tends to be expansionist. They want to conquer things, conquer other countries. Mm-hmm. Nazism is all that, fascism plus racism. So in Ukraine you had actual Nazis who wanted to exterminate every ethnic Russian in the world if they could. So in 1941, the Axis, Germany and its allies, invaded the Soviet Union, and in the very first few months conquered Ukraine. Most of the Ukrainians were fighting to defend their country, the USSR, but some minority of Ukrainians were so anti-Soviet, anti-Stalin, that they joined the Nazis. So that's where the split became worse. And those were mostly in the western part of the country. And so that division has remained. If you look at the voting patterns in Ukraine after 1991, you'll see that the ethnic Russians vote for the candidates who want to have good relations with Russia, and the other ones vote for the right-wingers.
So NATO alignment becomes North Atlantic Treaty Organization alignment. The West, Western European, becomes a proxy, are you saying, for Nazism to work? So that's the way that sort of anti-Russian viewpoints can be sort of propelled?
I'd frame it a little different way. The United States has been against Russia from the revolution, Russian Revolution in 1917 through today, except for those 4 years in World War II, 1942 through 1945. Mm-hmm. There we were allies because Nazi Germany was a threat to the whole world, potentially. Mm-hmm. Aside from those 4 years, the DNA of the United States government has been anti-Russian and of course anti-Soviet, anti-communist. So in 2014, the NATO, led by the United States, starts pouring weapons and trainers, instructors into Ukraine to boost the Ukrainian army in order to cause problems for Russia. And the Nazi aspect of it is just, they agreed with any group, including Nazis, who were anti-Russian. So the Nazism was not the prime cause. The prime cause was the desire of the United States and NATO to conquer Russia again, cause it to break apart, create so many problems and incidents and violence, casualties along the border, to make the people unhappy, to destroy the Russian economy with sanctions, and to make them overthrow Putin.
So
And that failed totally.
okay, that was my next question. Is
He's more popular now than ever.
how do you view the war going now? And I guess my other question will be, what effects do we see here in the United States from this sort of these stances as well? Like, what do we see that from the support for this continuing war?
Well, Ukraine is about to be defeated militarily. They're running out of troops. They may get some weapons, but there aren't trained troops. All the trained Ukrainian soldiers have been killed or wounded already. They can't fight on the front anymore. So they're running out of troops. They're completely overwhelmed in terms of artillery and air power. So Ukraine is about to collapse, and that's going to be very embarrassing for NATO. I don't know what's going to happen to NATO when Ukraine turns into a little small landlocked region in next to Poland and Romania.
What are the effects here in the U.S. from the war?
Inflation. All of these sanctions backfired immediately. The Russians were ready for it. They have been preparing for these sanctions from hell for 15 years, building up their own internal industries and agriculture. So the Russians knew what was coming. They knew that if they sent their troops into Ukraine in 2022, that they were going to be hit with every sanction imaginable. They were ready. And they oriented their economy to the east. They're now trading more with China and all the other Asian countries. And it wasn't Russia that cut off natural gas to Western Europe. It was the United States that blew up Nord Stream pipeline. And the United States has been the most insistent on making the European countries sanction Russia, cut off from their economy. So
increased inflation.
Increased inflation, the collapse of German industry, supply chain problems. Those are sanctions related.
How so?
Well, we're trying to make it harder for the countries we sanction to export things to the United States. All these things we're biting off our nose to spite our face.
Now you get into office. What is Congressman Young going to do to end the war?
Okay.
Or what's Congressman Young going to do in relationship to the American position in the war, I guess?
Yeah. I have always said we need to get out of NATO. We need to quit NATO, and the European countries will come to their own agreements with Russia and their own means of defending themselves against being invaded by Russia, but Russia has no intention of invading Western Europe. So that should be pretty easy to meet Europe's security concerns. stop sending any support whatsoever to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. That'll save us some money. And agree to Russia's peace proposal that they made in December of 2021, a few months before the special military operation. And that peace proposal, I had to go to alternative media to find an English translation of it. It was hardly reported in the West in any detail at all. But the peace proposal was very reasonable. Basically, in Europe, back off.
Mm-hmm.
Move forces away. Russian forces move east. NATO forces move west. Stop this arms buildup on the border.
Uh-huh.
Get all nuclear weapons back into their home countries. Most of them being U.S. nuclear weapons. Get them all back in. So very reasonable proposals that would have led to mutual security of Western Europe and Russia. So the strategy, unless we change direction and start trying to develop our own country better, and instead of trying to run everybody else's country, we're just going to collapse. The world is becoming multipolar, and the three poles might be the global south, maybe led by or cooperating with India. There's the Russia, China, Iran, another pole, and a number of other countries near them, and the U.S., NATO, Japan, Australia. And the U.S. pole is becoming weaker and weaker every day. You can see it in real time. And the two other poles are rising. They're cooperating with each other. There's the Belt and Road Initiative to improve trade.
It strikes me as like one response to that could be the U.S. is losing power, seize more of it. You seem to be going the opposite way, which is U.S. is losing power, allow it to happen, and fit in with the other two sort of rising powers.
That's a good way to put it. Just fit in like a normal country and stop telling everybody else what to do.
Why do you think issues of war are so lightly discussed nationally? I mean, the ability to wage war is the one thing that our national elected representatives can do, and I'm always struck by how little that actually is discussed in terms of candidacies, whether it's your primary candidacy in 22 or right now as you go in 24, of how those very stark differences between candidates over very small range of issues. It's kind of what we began with, and we'll kind of end with this closing here, is that your boilerplate with a lot of the other candidates, and here's something that is different, and it would seem like that would be a discussion point given how important the issue of war and peace is, particularly for our country as the largest military supplier the world over many times. I don't know. Why do you think that that isn't something that we discuss on at the level of a candidacy? Which I don't know if this is national. This is to me this is a national issue, but it happens all the time in all of our local precincts.
Well, you're talking about
it's a national issue.
That happens in all these local precincts, so we experience it locally. I experience it as Geoff Young. You get called a Putin lover from the Herald Leader. Is kind of how and that's the only time that Russia comes really into play in terms of serious discussion? I don't know.
The answer is simple, but it affects everything. We don't have a free press anymore in this country. We have a press controlled by the capitalist class. And so the Ukraine invasion, the Ukraine war, is a perfect example of it. Before February 2022, we're getting kind of normal headlines, Russia threatens to invade, blah, blah. After February 22nd, all of the mainstream media corporations in this country went completely Russophobic. They lied hundreds of times a day, and that is the worst outbreak of government propaganda. And it was done, in coordination with the CIA, which has a lot of influence in the huge mainstream media corporation. The propaganda really just kicked in and went up a big notch, and it's still there now in regard to Israel. So what they did, they tightened their control of the mass media and social media as much as they could. So the Democrats tried to get the FBI to work with all these, Twitter and Meta and all these things to just ban certain people who were saying things against the war in Ukraine and then Israel more recently. I would have been a Democrat voting with the Republicans on that one and trying to make sure that the FBI and the CIA never have any influence over social media. The propaganda is unbelievably powerful.
Let me. I'm going to finish this up, I think. Thanks for coming out. I got one more question, which is kind of bringing some of that anti-war, pro-peace discussion back a little bit more to Kentucky 3, and we'll just kind of focus here on Louisville particularly. It seems like a lot of your focus nationally or globally with anti-war is sort of an issue of policing and militarism. So do you see any sort of connections, or how do you take that and translate it to something like Louisville and understanding local policing and local militarization of areas, or do you see any kind of connections between those things? How one of the things that was kind of standard in my graduate school days, and this is coming from the 1960s, I think slogans was sort of "the war always comes home,"
right?
In various ways, and it seems like sort of I don't know. I mean, do you see that kind of militarism coming back in ways that kind of appear in districts?
Well, first thing I would do is try to stop all this training of American police forces by Israelis. What kind of
IDF, the Israeli
tactics?
Defense Forces, I guess?
Yeah, and consulting, corporations, Israeli companies, security companies. Have to stop that. Have to stop this program where the U.S. Defense Department sends armored personnel carriers for local police forces to use. It's not going to be used very often.
Yeah.
And I want there to be a law that prohibits any member of the National Guard from being sent outside the United States.
Yeah, you have that on your website, the National Guard.
Yeah, Save the Guard.
Save the Guard, that's it. So say that, what is that again? So what is that? So what is the Save the Guard? What is that? Describe it again. Defend the Guard.
Defend the Guard.
Yeah,
okay.
Defend the Guard.
Keep them in the 50 states. So to deal with natural disasters or, potential military, whatever, terrorist attacks or something, to enforce desegregation or something, like in the 60s or 50s and 60s. Keep them here in America and don't send them into these illegal, immoral wars of conquest and domination.
National Guard troops were called up quite liberally in the Global War on Terror, sort of Iraq and Afghanistan. Is that correct?
That's correct. The Guard is being pulled into these foreign wars, I don't know, in support roles or whatever they do. And the imperialists shouldn't have that resource. They shouldn't be allowed to take Kentuckians who have joined the National Guard in order to deal with floods and tornadoes and send them to some foreign country to support aggression.
No. All right. Well, Geoff, thanks for coming to the kitchen table. I got to get back to work up there in the bathroom renovation I'm doing.
It's been a pleasure.
So thanks for coming out. I'll give you a quick handshake here.
Thank you, Dan.
Wish you the best luck in your campaign, and let's hope some of those reporters start reporting on you.
Well, we'll see.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later.